Yeah.
Hi, hello, and welcome to this week's book chat, where we'll discuss banned books. And yeah, I'm supposed to hold this week's session, and we'll see how that goes. So the first talking point we had is the purpose and impact of banning books. Why
We're
are
talking
books
about.
banned?
Just going to quickly say hi to Clover, who's hopped in the chat,
Hi, Clover.
and hope that he's surviving on his severe lack of sleep.
Lack of sleep. What is this? Or rather, what sleep? What is this?
What is sleep?
What is a lack of sleep? Is that you just like
Yeah,
salt in the wound?
this is Yuna just bragging to us all that she actually knows what sleep is.
Maybe. At times. So why are
Yeah.
books banned, people?
Well, to give context as to like what we're talking about this week is books in general. You know, should books be banned? Should books not be banned? What books have been banned so far? Are there specific groups that are banning books, etc., etc. So yeah, it should be. I mean,
Dehydration. So welcome to the second week of We Have Hot Takes.
Oh, for God's sakes, I've got my bottle of water as well. Jesus.
Mama, can I stay with you?
So the question is, why are books banned, right?
I don't really ever think for much of a good reason. Or I would say 9 times out of 10, I don't think they're banned for a good reason.
No,
I
they're
don't think books
usually
should be
banned
banned.
because of one group of people or other decides that they don't find this content agreeable.
Like, this is the problem, right? Is the fact that you have a collective of people either have an opinion that is not appreciated by the wider community, or you have a very small community that do not appreciate the opinions of the wider community. So it's vice versa essentially. The really silly thing is that everyone is entitled to an opinion. That opinion doesn't necessarily have to be correct, but the entire thing, especially when it comes to literature, people should be able to debate books and other people's opinions. You are fully entitled to disagree with something you read. Everyone should be entitled to an opinion as long as you can admit, or as long as you are open to the idea of that opinion being tested for whatever reason. I think that's the thing that's. You have not muted yourself. You have not muted yourself.
You didn't mute yourself.
But okay.
Yes.
The answer is, generally speaking, for a multitude of reasons, but even more generally speaking, it's because a subset of the population finds something abhorrent.
Yeah,
Something like that.
A large group of people disagree with a smaller group's opinion, or a smaller group disagrees with a larger group's opinion. Like that's essentially what it is, and it's again like my original point stands of you should be entitled to an opinion as long as you're understanding that opinion is allowed to be contested, and your opinion may not be the opinion of the greater or wider group. I think this is one of the big issues at the minute is everyone takes not everyone, a lot of opinions are taken as fact, or people think their opinion is fact and therefore isn't wrong. And I think there's a lot of confusion with a lot of people where they read something and go, well, I don't agree with that, and it's my opinion that matters. When it's like, well, no, it's not in the slightest. You're allowed to agree or disagree with you. That is the wonderful, wonderful thing of free thinking.
I don't know how much to add in here.
No.
No, I have a lot, but it's like I don't.
Add it all. That's the whole point of this.
Yeah, I know. Let me. Okay.
I can jump to, since we're talking about it as well, under this purpose and impact of banning books. Wait, child. One moment, child. Who decides which books are banned? And how the roles of school boards, local governments, libraries, and advocacy groups.
Well, this is where I think a lot of governments and schools and stuff are actually failing students, because again, one of the biggest things you can ever teach someone is how to think independently and come up with your own opinion on things, right?
Mhm.
And the moment you start banning books and you don't allow people to come up with their own ideas of what to think and what to believe, and basically just go, this is wrong or this is right, and that's it, is the moment you stop teaching people how to think independently. And it's not good. It's where we look at, there are very specific books that are chosen in education. And I get potentially age is a factor in what is consumed. But there is so much that we look at that, or so much stuff that could be consumed, because in order to make an informed opinion, you have to have both sides of the story, or all sides of the story, right? People can't make informed decisions if you're essentially, even if it's horrific, it's a horrific opinion that should never be agreed with, because there are opinions like that. If that is your, the moment you stop someone engaging with that is the moment you allow them to, on their own, understand what constitutes a good or bad idea. And it kind of, I guess, subdues free thinking a bit. If that makes sense.
Yep. Well, to me at least.
Just like we all agree that, we all agree that a lot of things are bad. How do we? But I would, as an individual, and someone who has gone through education, has gone through the university cycle and everything, and has had to do the research and come up with my own opinions and things. I'm only allowed to do that by sitting there and going, well, this is what this is what I believe on this topic. Not everyone might agree with me on it, but ultimately this is my own decision, and I'm happy with that. I've been able to formulate my own thoughts instead of being told what is right or wrong. And I think that's incredibly important, especially where we talk about like teenagers and things who are developing their own sense of A, identity, and B, independent thinking, to be able to go, well, actually, I don't agree with this, or I agree with some of this and not the others. So it's where I think banning books is wrong, even if they're on incredibly horrific topics that we wouldn't want to ever be repeated. So
yeah, I don't think that a book should be specifically banned. I think obviously you should make reasonable judgment when you are, if we're talking about schools, for instance. Obviously, you're not going to go and put in a load of books for like young kids that are 18 plus kind of storylines and things like that, because it's just not the right fit. But I don't believe in censorship. I think there should be the ability for people to read everything and come to their conclusions about what they're reading, and you can then have an open discourse about it. I think the minute you go, we don't want you to read this, you are just creating one, rebellious, especially when you're talking about teenagers. If you tell someone not to read or not to watch something or not to do something, they're more likely to go out and do it anyway. But two, I think you take away the ability to stop and have a conversation about what they're reading, get their opinions, and if they're misinterpreting something, you can help them to reinterpret it in like the correct way. You can have open discourse about things. And
This is it.
I mean, obviously everyone already knows that I have a big issue with like the idea of the mix between church and state. I don't think religion should have any place in education in terms of what can and can't be taught, because again, I think it doesn't allow people to have the free will to make their own decisions, make their own mind up.
But yeah, this is exactly it. Like there are conversations you shouldn't have with people based on race because it's not appropriate, right? And that's fair. There is content that people of certain ages shouldn't consume because they also don't have the ability to understand the more complex factors engaged in things. But yeah, people have to be able to I think the most important bit is being able to read a piece of information and come to your own conclusion about it and take something from that, even if that opinion is not, agreed with on the whole. Because what you're essentially training individuals to do there is when they go out into the wider world and they're presenting, it's so important to be able to think freely, look at elections, and you look at religious debates, political debates, all these types of things, workplace culture, relationship ideology, all this type of stuff. You have to be able to look at a situation, take points of information from different sources, go, I don't agree with these ones, but I do agree with these ones, but I get what this is trying to do, and I don't really, understand this, and I might dig deeper into that, and actually I'm going to take bits and pieces from everywhere. You need to have all of those sources available to do that. Also, if you censor certain books, you're not going to learn. When you look at like historical accounts of things, how are lessons passed on if you can't discuss the lessons learned because you can't discuss the topic to begin with?
Well, I think as well, and I think it, the saying goes that knowledge is power, and I think that is important because the more you know, the more you are prepared for things. And like you say, a lot of the books that we see that are famously known for being banned are books that are like, they're not modern, they're not brand new. They're of a time where there was a lot of injustice all across the world, and without being able to read about it, we're not able to learn about it and therefore learn from it to move forward. And we've had this idea of like, it's been talked about with things like, well, you should, I think we should like censor these books or ban all these books because we don't need to focus on that anymore, and you can't erase history. Things that have happened, and just going, well, they're in the past, so we're never going to speak about them again, I don't think does any justice for the fact that it did happen. And we need to learn about it, to learn from it, and to know what we're doing going forward, to not fall into those same traps that we have seen creep round again.
I think we're all trying to avoid a major topic that has recently just happened in this conversation.
No, I mean, it's not even just one in particular. You can see it with so many things. And
can I ask what people's opinion is on changing the wording within books that were produced like 20 odd years ago, 30 odd years ago?
Depending on, I can understand changing wording, but
Can I ask
at
why?
the same time, I'm like, maybe do kind of like Disney has done and do a disclaimer that this is a product of its time.
Wasn't that Warner Bros?
No, yeah, Disney
Like-
does it. If you watch certain films or TV shows, older ones on Disney Plus, it comes up with a warning at the beginning saying,
Yeah, but I oh, okay.
This is
Pretty sure
it just-
Warner started it, and personally,
very possibly.
yeah, and personally, that is the way to go. You do not
Yeah.
change the original text. There is no point in making the original text more palpable for a modern audience, because by doing that, you are kind of missing the point.
Again, it's
Like-
more censorship. It's taking away from the fact that certain terminology that may not be acceptable in modern conversation was used, and more likely than not, it was used as a derogatory term. So it's understanding the power of those words. I mean,
But
I think
that's
the
the
one we had
key.
was Roald Dahl, wasn't it? They wanted to change
Yeah.
a lot of Roald Dahl's books. And the fact of the matter is, they already exist. People own them, have owned them for decades. So at this point, unless you're going to have, what is that film? I want to say it's called Elysium, with Christian Bale in it, where they go and get rid of like all media, and you know, they're burning the books and everything like that. Unless you actually put that kind of level of police state in across the entire world, you're never
Well,
going to
it
get rid of it
becomes-
anyway.
It becomes every dystopia novel we've ever heard of.
Fahrenheit.
Where no, exactly, where language is completely controlled, and thought crime is a thing, and like and you're completely right in what you're saying. A lot of the terminology that is being censored is or was derogatory, right? That means that it's connected to conflict. Now, to learn about conflict and how to avoid it and to learn from it, we have to study it. So to give a warning and go, there is going to be content in this that you might not agree with, but it is a product of its time, is perfectly fine. In the same way of giving, what we talked about last week, in giving warnings about, content that people might find disturbing. It should be the exact same thing, but it should be it should be explored and read for what it was of its time, especially where it comes to like historical events. Because if you're tailoring history to make it less
Or to make it more
difficult
palatable.
to consume, you completely get rid of you're changing history, and you're actually invalidating the experiences of the people that lived through it, which I think is a huge issue, and B, you remove, we have to experience uncomfortable things to learn how to avoid making those, things uncomfortable again. Like, it's the only way it works. The only way you can, and a lot of the time you have to do hard things, and to learn how not to go through them again. It's the hard lessons of life, and that might involve consuming things that you don't really find palatable. Yeah, it's, as someone who worked in education for a while, one of the things I always used to tell students was, don't be afraid to consume content. Be willing to. The one thing I would say is to make your own opinion on it. That's all you need to do. If you read it and you find it uncomfortable, is probably A, correct. B, you know that this is not something you would want to experience yourself, and you can learn how to avoid it and help other people avoid it. And it's in the same way that you have hard conversations about topics you don't want to talk about. So, I mean, do we have a couple of examples of books that have been censored and what exactly was censored about them?
Yes. Wait. I say yes, and then I realized that the actual censor, I don't have that list, because that list I looked at the other day and then forgot about it. I have on banned books and why they were banned. But on the note of censorship and banning in books and such, there's a book that is been banned in France. After it's called it's about reviewing recipes for suicide, and it caused a scandal in France in 1980s, and it resulted in the enactment of a law prohibiting provocation to commit suicide and propaganda and/or advertisements of products, objects, or methods for committing suicide. Which I found very interesting when I was reading it, because having that law is for me at least a good thing. But it's kind of odd that it came from a book, from subsequently banning a book, or rather, any reprint are illegal of that book.
I think
So
it's
that's
quite
one example.
Yeah, I think it's quite funny when you look at them. So there is actually, for anyone who is interested in this as a topic, there is actually a website called bannedbooks.org, where you can see. I think that list goes up to 2011, but you can see a massive list of banned books. And I know Yune has a document she's going to, hopefully, if we've got this working correctly, pop in the chat. And some of it is for, in my personal opinion, the stupidest reasons you will ever hear in your life.
Do you have an example of the stupidest reason I've ever heard in my life?
The Diary of a Young Girl by, Anne Frank's diary was banned in Lebanon as it was deemed to portray Jews in a favourable light.
Lebanon also banned Sophie's Choice and Schindler's Ark / Schindler's List because of the positive
Depiction
of Jews. I can't speak.
You can? You should do it more often.
But one book that the reason for it just made me laugh because of today's society. I Know Why the Caged Birds Sings. It was published in 1969. And according to ALA, the association, oh my god, the banned book, American Library Association, it has undergone 35 public challenges or bans since 1983, when members of Alabama's State Textbook Committee called it. They said they wanted to reject it because it espouses bitterness and hatred towards white people and encourages deviant behavior because of reference to lesbianism,
marital.
Yes. Sex
We've
and
been so
profanity.
cruel to you this evening, haven't we?
Yes.
I'll give you some kudos there, because for the longest time I read that as pre-martial sex, which got me
Absolutely,
very
yeah.
confused.
Yeah.
It's
A
the
lot.
sex you have before the martial arts, 100%.
I'm
So
gonna
I'm-
suplex. I'm gonna suplex you, and then we're gonna wrestle.
Another
No,
another
no.
interesting one is, before you go off on a tangent on that one,
Sorry.
Alice's Adventures in Wonderland was banned in the province of Hunan, China in 1931 for the portraying of animals acting on the same level as humans. That's not allowed,
So-
apparently.
Yeah, that's
Animals aren't allowed to speak and have humanisms.
So I'm assuming Animal Farm was also banned in China then?
Animal Farm, funnily enough, was
isn't banned in China, but it is in Czechoslovakia, Russia, UAE, Vietnam, and a couple of other places
Kenya.
which I can't
Yeah,
remember.
Kenya's one of them.
Yes.
Because of its criticism of corrupt leaders.
All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others is one of my favorite sayings.
4 legs good, 2 legs bad. My teacher used to parrot that at us anytime anyone swung on their chair.
But another book that has been banned in so many countries and actually caused me to do a is the fact that the Satanic Verses by Salman Rushdie?
Salman Rushdie, yep.
Yeah, Rushdie. Oh my god, it's Indian, of course it is. In 1989, Iran's leader issued a fatwa, which means a calling for the killing of the author and his editors and publishers. Which means he has been moving around a lot. And is always accompanied by a bodyguard and rarely does any kind of fan interaction since then.
One that I'm sure won't surprise you is the Da Vinci Code.
Okay.
Has been,
Kinda get that one.
yeah, that has been banned, heavily criticised and denounced.
In the Vatican?
Yes,
By the Vatican?
yes.
Ah, well, yeah.
Not
I
going to
wonder
say that
why.
one's that unobvious.
Okay, but this is my favorite banned book, period. And it's Fahrenheit 451. Because it's because they banned a book about book burnings, basically.
Yeah, that was. I think it's always amusing when the book that is banned is a book that talks about censorship,
Yeah.
and they're like,
How
"You know what?
about Austria's banning of all of Einstein's work?
Really?
Yes, in all things up to 1938, because it was annexed by by Nazi Germany.
American Psycho. Sorry to interrupt you, Eli. American Psycho was not only dropped by the New York Times bestseller list, but they also urge people not to buy it because of its extreme violence. And in Germany, Australia, and New Zealand, it was shrink wrapped and only sold to over 18s. Which actually, for that one, I can say that makes sense. That is not a book I would want somebody under 18 getting their hands on to read.
Okay, so I'm gonna go back to the very, very first question, which is what are the results of banning books? And in the best case for whoever is banning the book, it means no one is reading the book, but it's the Streisand effect, isn't it?
You can push it. No, you can push an agenda.
No. What I mean, the Streisand effect is if you ban the book, it's gonna get read more. Why did they ban this book? I want to know. I'm gonna read the book.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but also the result is you can push an agenda.
Yeah.
You limit free thinking.
Yeah, but that's like the That's if everything goes correct for the people that banned the book. And
It's called the
usually,
Streisand effect.
yes, I thank you. I didn't know there was a 2-minute echo in my home.
I'm sorry, the child was talking. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I tried to pay attention.
It's okay.
I missed that you mentioned the name of it. I'm
Uh-huh.
sorry.
It's also the fact that, generally speaking, we ban books from public libraries, or books are banned from public libraries. I might be US brained here, so this might not be true everywhere, or this isn't true everywhere. But it also means that, oh wait, they banned this book from my library, I'm gonna go to the bookstore, because it's not banned there. Which seems a bit silly,
I mean,
if
yeah.
the goal is to push an agenda.
No, absolutely. But this is the thing, and I think one of the questions in your talking points was, who is it that gets to decide whether a book is banned? And I think that's the major difference is, are we talking about books that were banned in schools by a school district, or books that were banned like on a government level? Because I think there is a very big difference. Obviously, like for the UK, you actually can't ban something from a specific school unless they happen to be private and therefore essentially run themselves. Public schools are all overseen by the same government structure, and so you can't just go, like, my children's school couldn't turn around and say, we won't be showing this book in school because we disagree with it, because for it to be in the school it has to have been okayed by the government and put into the syllabus, and therefore it's essentially a government mandate that they would be trying to fight against. So it doesn't happen. And I know that's very different with the US, obviously, because I'm seeing like a lot of these, it'll say, there was one here a second ago, this book was banned in school authorities in Charlotte, North Carolina, in Illinois, in Virginia, in California have banned this book. And so that for me is an odd thing, because I'm like, well,
Yeah, but I'd be
Why are you
curious
allowed
what books have been banned there.
this one was a children's book, which was somewhat was based on a true story of two gay penguins that hatched an egg in New York Central Park Zoo. It's called And Tango Makes Three.
Yeah. Very
Oh,
cute
so
book.
you get
It
agenda,
was
basically.
it was the single most banned book of 2009 in the US.
So yeah, the gay agenda.
Oh, I don't know what the book is about, but The Hoax of the 20th Century was classified as hate literature in Canada, and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police was destroying copies of it as recently as 1995.
So I knew that book title. So that's the subject we're tiptoeing around, or rather, the other subject we're tiptoeing around. So, because that's about Holocaust denial.
Again, this is where my personal opinion is: these books shouldn't be banned, but they should be discussed to show how they're incorrect. Because the moment you ban something, you almost give it credibility. Because you're in disallowing someone to go, this is why this is wrong. Sorry, you're not.
No, I agree with the point you're trying to make. If you
you're not
turn around and say we can't
you
talk
can't
about this,
Yeah,
you're missing the opportunity to educate.
but also it kind of goes, well, why can't we talk about it? Is it right? Like you can't.
Yeah,
you
it almost
can't,
opens a what are you trying to hide
Yeah,
mentality.
you not only can you not just disprove it, but other people can then claim that it's being banned because it's true. So you're in denying a narrative. Both sides can take the narrative and run with it however they want. And the thing is that as people, a lot, I don't know whether it's a human thing or what, but we're naturally inquisitive as to why we can't have access to something, and we are more likely to conspire that we're having something hidden from us rather than understanding why it's banned. And there's, you talk about conspiracy theories and everything. Yes, hate speech is horrible. No one should ever hate another person. Hate speech, and we talk about like novels, including hate speech and everything, should not be banned. They should be talked about and disproved. And there's still going to be people that go, I don't care. You can throw all the logic in the world at them. You can provide them all the facts, and they will still sit there and go, I disagree with you. I still, I still hate or I still think that, whatever horrible opinion it is.
Thing is, I think
you're always
the
going to have
funny
people
thing
like
is
that.
missed in it is a lot of these countries. I'm going to section it out into two different sets of countries. So you have our sort of first world countries like the UK and the US and Austria and Australia and Germany and places like that do all have freedom of speech as a part of their legal makeup, constitution, whatever the wording is, obviously, because not everyone uses the same. And so by banning a book, you are effectively, in a sense, taking away the freedom of speech. And, one of my things has always been, you can have freedom of speech, but not freedom from consequence. And I think that sometimes they look at that the wrong way around, because banning it isn't the consequence. Dissuading people of what it's talking about or proving it to be false, that's the consequence. You can say it, but people are going to argue it, they're going to debunk it, they're going to do X, Y, and Z to it, and that's the consequence of the freedom of speech. The minute you ban it, you're taking away that freedom of speech in a sense, which I just find amusing, because we do have a lot of countries, not just the US, but obviously there are a lot of countries out there who hold the title freedom of speech with quite a lot of pride.
It's exactly what I said earlier, is everyone is entitled to their opinion. You just have to be open to the fact that your opinion is going to be debated and disagreed with. And this is the issue, is where people take their own opinions and go, well, this is my belief, I'm not shifting on it, and I'm right. And actually, if people had the mind frame of going, this is what I believe, and if you give me enough evidence to prove me wrong, my belief will change. Like, people are almost not open to that debate in some instances, especially where, they're so, you look at politics and things, and people aren't willing to have their mind changed. And I think that's where a huge issue in the debate is the fact that if you're not capable of being able to admit that potentially you're wrong, and I think it's an ego thing. Everyone thinks they're experts on everything. And I think if you're not willing to have, or you're not capable of being able to admit where you're wrong, or admit that someone else has a better point than you, or has a point that makes more sense, then you can't have a debate, because the debate requires two parties that are able to trade talking points, and then someone come out of it and go, you know what, I still don't fully agree with you, but you've changed my mind on this. Or someone to come out and go, actually, I was wrong in this, and you were, you were right, and I see the point you were trying to make now. But that can't happen in this current day and age. And I don't know if it's because everyone has so much information out there, and a lot of false information is out there, that everyone just believes they're experts on everything. I don't know if it's an ego thing. I don't know. But I think there is a huge issue where debates aren't happening, or that there is almost not a space for an open debate, because of the fact that people aren't capable of accepting a difference in opinion, or where someone else is right and they're wrong. And you can obviously, if you have your own thoughts on that, please tell me.
I have to say, actually, to follow on to our actual point, there is a book here called The Chocolate War, that was considered to be one of the best ever young adult novels. It comes fourth in America's list of banned books from 1990 to 2000. Dealing with high school gang culture, the main challenges were on the grounds of sexual content, violence, and bad language. One school board noted the instances, and I'm going to read this full list for you because there is nothing I would say is exceptionally terrible. Noted the instances of causes for concern. The words and phrasing that they believed were cause for concern were "for Christ's sake," "bastard," which was noted 24 times, "Jesus," numerous, "Christ," numerous, "God damn," 10 times, "hell," numerous, "son of a bitch," 4 times, "shit" and "bullshit," 5 times, "queer," "homo," and "fairy," etc. And then it says, while arguing the book should not be in the library, the school accepted it could be easily bought in any local bookshop, which might have then suggested to them that banning the book was pointless. So they actually held a meeting to ban this book from a school and stated that it could be bought in any local bookshop, and therefore banning it was essentially pointless. But they were going to do it anyway.
Okay, I'm gonna broaden this a bit, maybe. So most of the books we've been talking about, kinda, sorta, has been fiction books. And I am of the firm belief that there are no topics in a fictitious work that is bannable. It abhorrent, things I don't want to read, sure. Bannable? No. But
You said that all the books we've spoken about so far are fiction.
Most. I said most.
All right.
Not all. Because this might be where I'm the odd one out, and this might be where I'm showing my cynicism. There are a lot of non-fiction books which are continuously referenced in arguments today that were released in like the 1980s, 1990s, which are demonstrably false, but they're still being used to what's that called? Justify racial segregation is a good example. So the Bell Curve is from, I think, the 80s, late 80s, and that's a book that has been demonstrably disproven, but is still being used. And the problem I see with this is that kind of picking up what Sai put down about the there might be some ego here where I have an opinion and you can't change it. But I'm having an issue making it so I don't think books like this, where you deliberately are misinforming your audience, should be allowed.
Oh, there should be a warning that, or a label that goes, "This has been disproven as factually incorrect."
Yeah,
Like
but
because this is the
but-
thing.
but
There is
here's the
opinions.
wait.
Opinions can be debated, but facts.
Yeah,
I can't say facts can be built upon. They can be learned. Like facts evolve. We look at science as a prime example of, we have a theory. This theory is the closest theory we have to, X or Y, and then a debate will happen. And I mean, there's an amazing conversation that happens with what the hell's his name? Who's the scientist I talk about all the time?
With the 3 names.
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
That's one.
And he's like, there is a scientific debate, is us going, we have two theories, which one works better, and then from that we understand what information we need to gather to learn more about it. So you can build upon theory and fact, but fact is either incorrect or it's not. And the moment that fact is proven to be correct or incorrect, that book should either be removed because it is no longer, or it should at least have a label on to go, this has been disproven. As
Yeah.
you know.
But now we're hitting on the issue. So let's say you are for racial segregation, running that as a hypothetical. We're ending up on the who gets to decide. Because if you hold a contradictory belief, nothing being said to state that the study or the book or whatever you are referencing is incorrect will be accepted. And a lot of arguments, unfortunately, on the internet at least, comes down to, well, that's just your opinion.
This is if you don't ban any books, and then you can have a debate about it. No one needs to decide. And for when it comes down to factually correct or incorrect, when you're talking about topics of science, where you're talking about all those types of things, then the moment that it has been disproven and there is enough evidence to disprove it or to prove it as factually correct or whatever, then I think it should be the scientific community, the people who know what the fuck they're talking about. Outside of that, it's a thing of, well, if we don't ban any books, no one has to decide, and therefore we can talk about and debate, and we can sit there and go, my opinion, this is my opinion, this is your opinion.
Yeah, this is where my cynicism is gonna shine right through. That doesn't work.
Why not?
Has everyone heard the it's a quote commonly attributed to Twain, but it's probably not Twain. A lie can get halfway across the world before the truth gets its boots on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's the issue, and I'm not even going to go far back in history, and I'm not going to reference specific events because I'd prefer not to get cancelled, honestly. Recent events, generally speaking, have shown us that it takes an inordinate amount of work to disprove bullshit. It doesn't work because as soon as you do that, there's 6 new bullshit points. You can't win this when the other side gets away with spewing falsehoods. You can't win a factual battle when it takes 10 times as long to disprove something than it takes to spread a lie. And we've had this issue for the past 10 years. And I'm thinking specifically Sweden here. But the world in general.
I want to really quickly catapult onto your quote. It, funnily enough, actually is believed to have originally come from Jonathan Swift. And so the original quote was, "Falsehood flies and the truth comes limping after it."
Yeah, that's
so
a better one. So
that when men
actually
come to be undeceived, it's too late. The jest is over, and the tale has had its effect. It's been how many people this quote has been where it changed.
Attributed to is insane.
Mark
Yes,
Twain, Thomas Franklin, Fisher Ames, Winston Churchill, and Terry Pratchett.
Okay. My question then is, so are you saying at the front end, who do we allow to release information and who do we not?
I don't know what I'm saying. Sorry. I
think the issue is.
I understand your point of being because you are correct. Misinformation spreads a lot quicker than factual information, and because people won't agree with that, they will try to disprove them and everything and whatever. My point though is that if your problem is that, find me a solution that works. Because to
Okay.
me, there isn't one.
Yeah, no, there isn't one. But here's the main issue. Because I would love to live in your idealized world where we have two differing opinions and we can hash them out via debate. But the issue I'm having is we were taught or told that fundamentally humans are fact-finding machines. We like facts. We like the truth. And if that was true, when the internet was released, when Wikipedia got released,
Yeah.
everyone should have been the most goddamn informed person ever. Because from what we've heard, everyone wants the truth. No, I'm sorry. People don't want the truth. People want what makes them feel good. So I agree. There's no solution to this, and I am well and thoroughly black-pilled on this, because I can't find one.
No, but this is my point. Is that so to come onto the internet as a thing? The moment that information became a free for all, anyone can put anything out there and anyone can read it and have access to it.
Mm-hmm. And edit it in the case of Wikipedia.
Can edit it, yeah, can edit so. This is where if you cannot control the flow of information, the only thing you can do is talk about it once it's out. And the thing is that one of the debate is a skill, right? Debate is a skill that you can learn. And to be fair, I think, considering I'm the youngest of us here, my generation and your generations and generations beyond us are probably fucked when it comes to being able to debate things. I think it's very difficult, especially I'd say my generation, probably the generation below me, who have missed that learning step, have probably got a screwed when it comes to this, because we are now in a culture where, again, personal belief trumps fact. The thing I will say though is if we start teaching debate again in school, the collective outlook on information will change. So yes, you're right in that there is no solution to being able to monitor what goes out there, to be able to stop what goes out there, unless you just basically have control of the entire narrative and you get to choose, and there is no one person that should be able to choose what goes out there. But and this is where individual skills of free thought need to be refined. Individual skills of being able to separate bullshit from fact and to be able to look at the information in front of them and go, okay, this makes no sense, but this does make sense. That needs to be trained. And so I'd say my generation, the generation below me, generation above me, so your guys' generation, generations beyond, are probably screwed because we're past that educational stage where how we think is trained. And again, we were essentially given a tool with limitless, and I say limitless in quotation marks, it's not limitless, but limitless possibilities where anyone could say anything and get away with it essentially scot-free. And everyone could access that. So what became, it was a kid in a sweet shop, that the sweet shop is endless, and then they get diabetes, and you sit there and go, huh. Whereas if you train kids before they go in, this is an analogy, by the way, you train kids before they go into that sweet shop to be like, okay, let's be a bit health conscious. Let's understand that we should only take this amount, and this thing should definitely not be touched because that is 100% sugar is going to kill you. Whereas this is actually not too bad. It's about teaching, and if you censor all of the bullshit and you don't teach them how to recognize it because they can't read it and look at it and compare it to something that does make sense, and you place, spot the difference, they're never going to learn. And this is why I would say that I think politics over the next 30, 40 odd years is going to be absolutely fucked. But we're going to start seeing shifts in how information is received over the coming generations if we act now to change how information is and change the way that we train kids to perceive and understand and make informed decisions. Because that's all it is informed decision based on an individual's ability to go, this information is bullshit. This is so that is your solution there. And it's a fucking long-winded one that's going to take years and years, and an overhaul of the education system and everything. A difference in approach to how we handle literature and stuff. If you take the time to reform the education systems and essentially sit there and go, okay, we're going to teach you how to think for yourselves. I'm going to give you 3 different texts here. One of them is disproved fully. One of them has been proven to be correct. One of them was kind of unrelated, but somewhat had good points and bad points. I want you to go through all 3 of these texts. I want you to identify which is which, and I want you to explain to me why. And then I want you to actually tell me, or even, we have philosophy and ethics classes where we explore the concepts of free thought and free speech and everything, especially ethics and stuff. Like, that should be core in education, because we've essentially trained kids to repeat what they're given. You look at like the way exams are work, like it's just can you memorize this? And all we're doing is training them
Take
to
something up when you're talking about school and kids and how the information is today.
Yeah.
Our 8-year-old has a point in their schedule where they talk about not believing everything you hear or see or read, and about fact checking and stuff. Yes.
Well, in essence, we're talking about media literacy.
I think what
Which
we're going to do... Oh, sorry, carry on, Eli.
No, go ahead, because I will tangent and you won't be
Okay.
able to stop me.
Okay, we're going to take a really quick 5-minute break. If there are like questions for the chat here, are there any books that you have seen banned that you think shouldn't have been, or do you have any opinions on the topic? We'd love to have your input, and we will see you in 5 minutes.
See you soon. Welcome back to our book chat about banned book.
I realized I could have made a funny here and just done a non sequitur. So, moving on from the previous topic.
I actually have an interesting question.
Uh-huh.
Because when looking through the list and things like that, one of the books that came up that has been banned quite a lot, that is probably a more modern book, is Harry Potter.
Mhm.
Obviously, in the terms of its banning were on the basis of religion, the fact that there's magic and spells and witchcraft and therefore evil. However, it brings up an interesting question. If we are, as a people, not specifically just us, but you see a lot of people argue against the banning of books.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, apologies, I got nabbed by a child in the background. Yeah, if we're against the banning of books, what is the difference between book banning and cancelling? Because
Oh,
technically speaking, Harry Potter, for instance, I think is quite a good example of this, is, for lack of a better term, censored by two very opposing groups of people for two very opposing reasons.
So who's banning Harry Potter? If it's fucking Christians, their issue is magic.
no.
Essentially,
Can we talk about
no, we
irony?
can't. No, we can't talk about irony. That is part of it, and then it's the.
and then obviously you have a lot of people, especially within like the LGBT community and things like that, have obviously cancelled the books through the cancellation of the author because of the author's behaviour. And for me, from a censorship point of view, what makes one acceptable and one abhorrent is the question I want to ask. Because they are
Am I allowed to
essentially the
comment on
same
this?
thing.
Yes, well, canceling doesn't prohibit the book from being distributed.
Distributed.
Yes.
Distributed, yeah.
Yes, words hard, very.
It's a Sunday.
Whereas banning actually makes it illegal many times.
Well, yeah, but then the side of that is like, for instance, actually, Harry Potter was banned in quite a few Christian schools in the UK. This is the information I'm going on. I'm not talking about others because I have no real knowledge of that, but specifically in the UK, it was banned in a lot of Christian schools for promoting witchcraft.
Again, irony. I know I'm like, come on. Really?
There's a difference between magic and God.
There was also something about how the spells, if you were to say them out loud, they're
Yes,
actually
we're
real
Latin.
and would
No,
allow
my-
evil in.
No, really?
Yeah.
I'm okay. I'm sorry, but I don't know if I want to say that as true without.
Again, no, because I want to get to the point that I'm trying to make, which is, what is, like, why is one deemed acceptable and the other one isn't?
I'm
Because
gonna be the.
I know
odd one out
what you're
here.
saying, Yune, about how technically speaking cancellation doesn't involve like the legally enforced banning of something. However, it does come on more of a moral dilemma, because TikTok is a fantastic example of it. You have things like BookTok and people who will mention Harry Potter in their videos will get inundated with hateful comments about the fact that by reading the books or talking about the books is promoting the author and all of these sorts of things, and they should all be burnt. Like, the book
No.
should not exist.
The
No.
act of cancelling, like not having them, not actively trying to buy the books. That part, I'm okay with. The lynching of other people for their opinions is not.
I'm gonna be the odd one out. Because I don't think either of these are necessarily acceptable, morally acceptable specifically. So, since we're on the topic of Rowling, I pretty much don't agree with anything she said on the internet for the past 80 years or something. That I'm aware of. So I'm not gonna buy the book. I don't mind the fact that others, like, that you spread your dislike of their opinions, and thus you boycott their works. I do that for two specific authors at the moment, and it's Rowling and is it Orson Scott Card?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't want to fund their lifestyles because of their opinions. I'm fine with that. Trying to get them removed from the internet or their place of work is a step too far for me. And to Une's point, while technically canceling does not prohibit the distribution of that person's works, it tends to be that this has a domino effect where, well, if you read Harry Potter, then obviously you are a transphobe, so obviously you need to be cancelled. And this continues and continues and continues and continues. I don't like cancelling. At least not in the way it's used today.
Yeah, like it's an interesting one. The bit that always confuses me is why
I think
you
I've
would choose.
probably been a tad unfair in that question, to be perfectly honest.
Why would you choose one over the other? I almost want to add. Like, what is there a reason to kind of do one rather than the other?
No, the question
I
was
think it ties
why
back
is
into...
one generally accepted and one isn't.
I think the thing is, I think it comes down to two things mainly. I think one of the things that comes about in it is the moral side of things. Is a book being banned by a school for moral reasons? Or is it for a more personal, organizational reason? Whereas when it comes to, like, cancellation, it tends to be something that is purely moral. And unfortunately, again, I feel I've been a bit cruel with the question because it ends up translating more into is there a time when you can take the art away from the artist? Is there a separation between those things?
Oh, but that means we can talk about Death of the Author. Which honestly, like, I am all for, technically speaking. Like, if you enjoy Harry Potter because of, like, Harry Potter, then what Rowling has or hasn't done should technically be irrelevant. Like, the work should stand on its own.
I agree with you. I think I agree with you on that point. And again, I think it ends up being a tad more of a generational thing, because obviously, for like my age group, they were books we grew up with, and they did become a massive part of identity. I mean, there was a whole span of time where what your Hogwarts house was integral to your personality for a lot of people. And so I think it's very difficult to then... I think the problem comes where it's something that happens after the fact. And it's the same thing I have with a lot of banned books when we're talking about banning books now that came out many, many years ago, is that the issue is, are we... I'm trying to think of the right wording. Are we taking something from a different time and holding it to our modern concepts? And is that something that we should be allowed to do? Should we be able to hold something to a moral standpoint with a modern mindset when something wasn't written with that as a moral mindset at that time?
Kind of. So, I'm mixing up the book title. Give me a second because I want to get this right. Okay. So The Shadow over Innsmouth is a horribly, incredibly racist story. If I'm not mixing it up with another Lovecrafty story, but I'm pretty sure Shadow over Innsmouth is the fishy one, for lack of a better term. And while we can sit here and we can say, okay, this is a horrible story because of all this racism and heavily implied feelings about, what's that called? Racial mixing, I think is the term. I don't think we can fault it for having these themes and these feelings because it was written at that time. So we can judge it by our lens, but no, not judge it. We can recontextualize it with our modern standards, but I don't think we can judge it. I also feel like this is a low conviction take, so I could probably very easily be pushed off of this point.
No, so I looked into it because I wasn't familiar with the book. And yeah, essentially the concern horror aspect of it is the mixing of races, which is so standards of the time. That was the phrasing I was looking for earlier.
Oh yeah.
And the thing is, I think there is a difference between someone who is even to the standard of their own time. Again, we'll use it as an example. Racist. Lovecraft is actually an interesting one because he actually came to the conclusion before his death that he'd actually been incredibly racist. And had started to somewhat work on putting it out there that his work was
incredibly racist.
Wrongly so. to
Yeah.
at least say, I am now aware of what I've written and the impact that's had. So I think that is a different set of standards, because that is someone who has purposely, even to their own standard of time, written something and gone, or people at the time, because it was noted to him when he was writing them that he was writing very racist books. Where I have an issue is, again, where something is written in a time where terminology might be used that, while we as a modern day society can say, absolutely not, we do not use that, it's derogatory, it's disgusting, it was a well used terminology, however wrong it may be for us now, was a well used terminology in their standard. So can we then condemn something for use of a terminology where the argument for why the terminology is wrong is of a modern standard?
Surely that's a case if you look at it and go, okay, for when it was and what it was correct, and now we don't use that again. We've progressed and learned from that, because again, literature, especially when it comes to art, is essentially just at this point in history, at this point in time, this is what we were doing, and whether it was right or wrong or not, we look back at that and go, okay, so we've now learned from that, so we don't use that language anymore.
No, I think
You
this, I think this brings us full circle
modern
back to the when you're bringing something into like schools or universities or institutions, because again, what you read on your own time is your own choice. That is fully that. It's personal. But when we are talking about something that's being done in an institution, banning them isn't the right answer, but forewarning and having the conversation about this was written in this time where this was the standard, and that is not our standard now, and it's going to be difficult to read this because we're going to look at it through that modern gaze of, I can't believe they said that, I can't believe they did that, I can't believe X, Y, and Z happened. But we need to read it so that we can understand and we can debate and we can converse on why things have changed. To Kill a Mockingbird is an amazing one for that.
Every lesson learned is a lesson learned through mistakes made. Right? And the only way that you actually acknowledge those mistakes exist is by reviewing them or experiencing them. And then going, okay, that was a bad idea, let's not do that again, let's change. And we're looking at everything from now to the past, but consider it this way. In 20 years' time, how much of what we say now is going to be absolutely torn to shreds and exposed as being politically incorrect or insulting or degrading or non-inclusive? Do you know what I mean?
No, but that's the thing. I think about books that came out when I was younger, and we're talking, you're talking late 90s, early 2000s, that would not pass the standard of time now. And that's
it's the same with everything.
30 years. But again, I mean, especially when you look at, I think books like, and I'm going to flog a dead horse here because I love the book, I love the film. To Kill a Mockingbird, I think, is something that should not be in any way, shape or form be banned, because even if it itself was a fiction, it was a story, there are enough true events that happened that mirror it. And so it is a fantastic starting point to talking about history and things that have happened. And we shouldn't be looking at that going, oh, well, it makes these people look bad, or it makes these people look better than they should have looked. No, that's not how we should be teaching things, because that's putting a personal bias on education. And there should not be a personal bias on education.
It's no one knows what, and it's one of the issues I have when it's like, oh well, so and so said this. Like you see all the time on social media, So there's a tweet so and so said 10 years ago that like we should cancel them for, and it's like, okay, people change in 10 years. Like the language used back then as a whole has changed entirely. Look at swearing, for God's sake. Like the taboo on swear words 10, 15, 20 years ago, saying the word fuck, for example, like was absolutely no way, And now it's like it's common day, like it's common language. You look at
no, I think that one I'm going to have to slightly disagree with you on, because I think it takes a fair bit of effort and a bit of self-awareness to go onto a social media platform like Twitter or whatever it was at the time.
Whoa.
I feel this is going to come down to you are responsible for your own actions, and posting on social media is a deliberate action.
And I get that.
I think to a point. I'm sorry.
I'm not saying you shouldn't be held accountable, but people change over X amount of years, and language changes over X amount of years. And
yeah, but the issue I have, and I'm using this specific example, the issue I have with where tweets are brought up, right? People posted tweets in, say, 2004, and they said incredibly derogatory, misogynistic, or racist, or sexist, or homophobic things. Is that argument comes up is the people have changed. And the issue with that is you can't claim to have changed without taking accountability. And a lot of the times, the argument is, but that was a decade ago. They've probably changed. But there is no accountability for it. Because the fact of the matter is, if you've changed, if you've learnt from it, where were you coming out and saying, I'm going to hold my hand up here, not once I've been found out and I'm covering my back, but before then, I'm going to hold my hand up here and say, I've deleted some tweets today that were in my history. They were many years ago, and I realise now that I said things that were wrong and hurtful and X, Y, and Z, and I've learnt from that. And I'm not expecting immediate forgiveness, but I have learnt from that, and I want it to be known that I am taking full accountability for what I said. Because again, 9 times out of 10, with these things where it comes up about people's tweets coming out of the ether, is they would have never said a word about it unless it was put in front of them.
But I okay. This might be a every rule has an exception thing, but from what I've seen, when it comes to this, is someone finds a tweet from X amount of years ago, and and even if the person has taken accountability and been repentant, it doesn't matter because they said it. And they shouldn't.
That is an exception. I 100% agree with you. That's an exception to rule. If someone has shown, again, I think this goes back to our first book club stream where we talked about the difference between forgiveness and redemption.
Mhm.
The fact is, yes, you can say something and you can apologise for it, and everyone might not accept that. And they are allowed to not have that acceptance, but they can't hold it against you as if you haven't made reputations. And I think that's the thing. I have a big issue with people almost glory boating redemption and having no intention of actually holding accountability for their actions until they are faced with it. But I also do have an issue with people ignoring someone's attempts at accountability and redemption, because at the end you just get to a point where you're asking, what is it that you're actually fighting about? They've done a thing that you dislike, and you want them to understand that they've done a thing you dislike, which they have. They've taken accountability for that and they've worked to change it. So what are we? We're just arguing on the fact that they did it in the first place. And then the problem is that's a card you can pull on everyone, because everybody has skeletons of some description in their closet. Might not be the same skeletons, but we all have something. No one is perfect from birth till death.
No, I think it's key to understand that, like, language changes. You need to accept. You can only judge it in the period in which it was written. To judge it by anything else is to judge something by rules that weren't in place in that situation, and that shouldn't be the case, because at that point it is being judged what I would consider unfairly. How is some because if you're judging a piece of work by modern rules rather than the rules of the time period, it's got no idea what the rules are going to be in the future. The writer had no idea what was going to be said or what the situation was going to be or anything along those lines, right? So what how is that? How are you meant to be able to sit there and, like, you know, like, judge it fairly? You can't. Because you're essentially forcing it to play by rules that didn't exist.
Yeah, but it boils. Yes, it boils down to if you grew up in a society, if you were living in a society where X was acceptable and like widespread, it's kind of ridiculous for us to judge you, say, 100 years later, by our own moral lenses, because, like, honestly, by that point, it's not even a you should have known better. It's a I'm not even sure you could have known better, because society shapes us in numerous ways.
Yeah, it's just I don't think you can everything like art should be appreciated or unappreciated or recognized for the time it was made, not for modern day standards. The rules were different back then. You can't judge something that wasn't made modern day by the modern day standards. That makes no sense.
No, I think I agree with that. I think you can absolutely put a disclaimer on something and say, this was written in a time where this terminology, while not right, was seen as acceptable in that time frame. Hello,
Yeah.
Serious Sam. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, you can't judge something not written in the modern day by the standards of modern people, because that just
Feels silly, yeah. But
it's illogical. It makes no sense.
But I don't know if that's answering the key or the core question, which is what is the difference between banning a book and canceling someone? And I like, if I'm the odd one out by going, I don't find either of these morally acceptable.
No, I agree with you.
No, I don't think anything should be banned by council. I think it should be. It goes back to the everything goes back to the initial point. Like, goes back to the initial point of books should be examined for what they are, and then learned from, understood, learned from, and not. Because the moment you start banning or even cancelling them, you cannot have a discussion about them.
No, and again, I think this is where it becomes the art versus the artist and the separation between the two. I can 100% sit there and agree where someone might say, this person is problematic and racist, and sexist, homophobic, whatever. And so therefore, I no longer wish to support them. And that's absolutely fine. As a personal choice, you are allowed to make. I can understand that you might even want to broadcast that because you might want to make it known for other people that this person has done these things and to you they are abhorrent, and for that reason you will not support them going forward. However, for the things that already exist, again, use Harry Potter as an example, you can't remove those things. The books exist, the films exist, the games, the parks, all of these things exist. Now, you want to boycott that person gaining funding from them? Sure, go ahead, don't buy another piece of anything that is merchandise in any way, shape or form as that thing. However, it's also taking into consideration that that is a personal choice. Because we saw it massively when Legacy came out?
Hogwarts, yeah.
Hogwarts Legacy, yeah.
People were excited for it, especially people of my age group. It was looked to be a very good game. And so they were excited to play it. And people who streamed it, for instance, when it came out on day one, were having their entire chats filled with hate and death threats and just like disgusting vitriol, because how dare they support the artist by purchasing this game. And there does come a point where you have to go, well, the money she was getting from that has already been made. The minute she signed on to allow it, she'd been paid. So purchasing the game, actually, at that point, the only person it's going to make a difference to will be the voice actors and the developers and things like that. It's not going to make any difference to her pocket at all. And that's not personal at that point.
She also has royalties.
No, I think
no,
actually that
no.
was the
Not
thing they
royal-
stated, that she didn't receive any royalties from that game. It was purely a purchase of contract, in which case the payment had already been made.
Yeah, but
It wasn't royalties I was after, but it was the word that came to mind.
yeah,
You
but
got what I was.
okay. So the slippery slope argument, which is highly dismissive, the way I put it, but okay. So the argument goes that by buying the game, it increases the chances of another game being made in the same vein by the same author, which in turn will make her more money. Which isn't necessarily wrong, or correct for that matter. But yeah, it comes back to like, I don't have an issue with boycotting. And I don't have an issue if you see someone that's streaming a game from a developer or a series connected to a series of works which you take issue with. Bringing that up to the streamer respectfully and going, okay, so going with Rowling again, is problematic for this and this and this and this reason, and I would like you to be made aware of this since you are supporting her indirectly, or like you are supporting a game based on her world. That's fine. But I don't think you can demand other people to boycott because you're boycotting, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's where unfortunately it becomes an entirely different conversation for me, which is, can you disagree with, again, use the term artist, can you disagree with an artist and still enjoy the art? Or still partake in the art? Can you have the moral standpoint? Because I can absolutely sit there and say, I 100% disagree with everything she said. I think most of the stuff that comes out of her mouth is absolute nonsense. And at this point, I'm almost inclined to believe she does it to stay relevant. I genuinely think that's where it comes from now. It's the hate gets me attention, so why not? What other wacky thing can I say? However, I loved the books. I enjoy the films. I like the game. You know, I have kids. My kids love working out what their houses are and seeing how different they are. And, you know, we've had Harry Potter themed birthday parties and things like that because for them, it was one of the first books that actually got some of them interested in reading. My oldest, it definitely was. And so, where do I fit in that category? Because I absolutely disagree with her. I think the things she says are disgusting. But I like what she produced. And I like that it had an impact on my children. And I also do like that we can talk about elements of it that was not picked up at the time that it was written. But, again, with that modern standard of time, we can point out now are stereotypes or damaging, and we can have that conversation. And so they're learning from that too. But it doesn't take away from the fact that most of my children, because some of them are still too young, most of my children have absolutely delighted in the magical world of Harry Potter. So where in that where do you draw the line?
This is dovetailing the word I'm looking for? This ties nicely into the role of young adult literature in banning. Kinda. So I abhor the please think of the children argument. I think it's a shit argument, honestly.
Well, there you go.
And one of the main reasons for that is I believe that a lot of the time, the reason why we see this outrage from parents is because parents don't take the time to actually figure out what kind of media their kids are consuming. So when the child raises questions about the media they are consuming, the parent has a visceral response where I didn't bring this up and I am not equipped to deal with this. So therefore, therefore this should not be allowed because, in essence, this makes me look like a bad parent. I can't answer my child's questions, so this makes me look like a bad parent, and that makes me feel bad. And therefore, the book shouldn't exist, or media shouldn't exist. Whereas,
yeah, no, I get. I had a lot of free reign when it came to the media that I was consuming growing up.
Mhm.
My you know, there was not really much of a watchover. I would be taken into bookshops and it was like, you've got your pocket money, go and buy what you want. And I would go and pick things that interested me.
Mm-hmm.
But purely without any sort of overview. And I can absolutely say there are books that I read and films that I watched and not so much games, but definitely books that I read that I was not the right age for. That were far too old for me, or the themes were not meant for me. And so I take a massive interest in what my kids are reading, and we talk about stuff. You know, my oldest is in her teens. So a lot of what she's starting to branch out in are like the YA novels and things like that. And so I take a very big interest in what she's reading to make sure that she's able to read things that obviously, of course, interest her, but also that we're able to have a conversation about things where she's read something and can go, what, you know, well, how am I supposed to feel about this, or whatever the conversation may be. And there are times where I'll read a book that she'll see the cover of or something, like the look of, and be like, oh, what's it about? And I'll give a rough overview, and she'll say, well, can I read it after you? And there are times I've said, yeah, of course you can. Absolutely no problem. And there are other times I've had to say, I'm going to say no right now, because I think you're still a little bit young, because some of the themes in this, I think, are above you. But once you're a little bit older and have a bit more understanding, more than happily lend it to you. And
Yeah,
I think that's important, to be able to have those sorts of conversations.
Because, like, okay. Our oldest, this isn't going to be books, because trying to get our oldest to read at the moment is difficult, which is sad, but it is what it is.
He wants to consume it. He just doesn't want to actually read.
Yes, that's fair. But, like, we've had conversations with our child from very early on, where it's been, okay, I understand you want to watch this anime. And most of the time that ends up with, Dad, have you seen this anime? And if I haven't, I have to spend a bit of time watching this anime. But like in general, I vet the media that he is allowed to consume. But because we've had the conversation where it's like, okay, so these are topics that you are not old enough to understand yet. So you need to wait with these. We've ended up in a situation where he will walk up to us before he starts any media thing, more or less, as far as I'm aware, and go, okay, so I found this. It looks interesting. Can I? And then he gets an answer like half a day later or something, and he just fully accepts it because, like, yeah, okay, I understand that I need to be older for that, and I feel like a lot of parents just need to have this conversation with their children from the start. Just going, this isn't disallowing you from doing this because I am being mean to you or because I don't believe you can handle it ever. It's because it deals with themes that I don't think you're adult enough to understand, or old enough to understand, or fully process, I guess.
I will apologise to anyone who's actually watching the stream that my phone has decided to be the noisiest git on the planet tonight.
That's nice, because we
then-
haven't heard it.
Oh, well, that's all right then. Because I was going to say as well, I also apologise for any background noise that's coming up on my end, because usually I have NVIDIA Broadcast that filters out all the wonderful background noise that I have in my house constantly. And today it's decided it doesn't work. So...
We've had a little background, but not much.
Yeah, I've had to mute a couple of times to do the patented mum. Will you shop?
Yeah,
It's
I
almost like
told
this is a
us.
parental advisory stream.
Yeah.
Yeah, I told our oldest that unless the mic is red, I need him to put his hand on my shoulder and then get my
See,
attention before he speaks.
you
since
say
he's
things
3.
like that, and I'm so jealous of the children you have, because right. So I talked to the kids before we even started up with the streaming and said to them, "Look, I'm going to be doing this, and you know how we do book club on a Sunday night? Well, now we're going to be doing that live." And sort of talked a little bit about what that was, but essentially said, instead of it just being kind of the 4 of us and whoever else joins in the VC, and you being able to be heard occasionally by people who essentially know you, we're going to be live on the internet where anyone could be watching. And so, in these times, unless it is an emergency, I'd like you to leave me alone, essentially. You know, you've got your stuff fully charged, you've got everything sorted, you're fed, you're watered, you've had all you need to have. For an hour and a half, you should be good. And the first week they were superb. My olders, however, since the first week, have been utterly useless. And it is just quite amusing that the younger ones fully get it. I'm like, okay, I'm going to stream now, and they're like, okay. And then basically leave me alone. I've seen one of them once this evening. The rest I've not seen. My oldest, however, I've had to tell to sharp several times, because even from another room, she seems to be in, like, I need to be talking at full volume. And you're just like, okay.
Yeah.
So hopefully I will have NVIDIA broadcast working again next week. Though
It hasn't been that far.
from my Googling, it seems to be an issue that a lot of people have that they don't really know how to fix. So, and as I am about as technology minded,
No, you can't say that anymore.
No, I can. I can still
Nope.
say that. I am still 99% technologically inept.
For anyone listening, Ari is lying
I am not.
or incorrect.
I'm not. I am not techie at all.
This is a lie.
I love
have
tech.
one
Tech
thing.
does not love me.
I have one thing I want to bring up before closing banned books part. I found that there's this banned books museum in Tallinn, Estonia,
Interesting.
which was started in 2020. And they have different exhibits where they have the book, the author, why it was banned, where it's banned, and all of that. Just all types of, like, any books they can get their hands on that has been banned for any whatever reason anywhere in the world.
We shall have to add that to our when we win the lottery and go on our tour of all the nice libraries trip, you know.
Yeah. And I was
They
like,
have a podcast.
yes, I was getting there. They have a podcast and they
Eli.
also do book club.
Oh wow. Should we go
Yeah.
after them for copyright? They'll be coming after us for
Oh.
copyright.
Yeah, and me and my endless hope was like, maybe they have a book club when I can join. No, it's Sundays.
It's Sundays.
First Sundays.
Sunday is the best day for book clubs. This is why. Obviously, speaking of book club, and because we are starting to wrap up now, next week is a bit more light-hearted because we've had some very heavy topics over the last 2 weeks. We've somewhat called it Bring a Book, and it will be a more chatty session about
As
what is your
opposed to today.
as opposed to our debatey trying not to set off several communities sessions. But yeah, so we'd love to hear what it is you're currently reading, what you've read recently that you've really enjoyed, and of course, if you do want to come and sit on the sofa with us, for lack of better phrasing, the link for the Discord is in my whatever it is, panel-y about you bit, and I think if I do this, it's now in the chat. Ta-da!
Nice.
See. So techie.
Look, yes, look at our resident untechie person.
Yeah, absolutely. I have smart things that do stuff for me that I could not explain to you how they do the things that they do.
That's not being techie. This is another topic for another time.
Yes, you can have Eli and I argue about what makes someone techie. While Yune smokes
be
us
a
all with the amount of books that
non-based
she's
stream.
read in a 7-day period.
Eh, eh,
And I say this for the people that will not be aware that we ran a competition a couple of months back that was a pages read in a month, and she beat the competition so, like, with such a large gap, it was unreal.
I almost read more than the other participant put together.
Yes, indeed you did. So yeah, you can join us next week for our Bring a Book. And again, like I said, if you actually want to come and join in and chat with us, you can come and join the Discord. PA is a fantastic place. And I will be back streaming tomorrow for an extra one-off with a game called Call of Dragons?
Something akin to that, yes.
I'm sure it's Call of Dragons.
I'm
going to double check, and I'm going to say that it is
Call of Dragons.
Yes. See, yeah, I know what I'm talking about all the time. Absolutely. And then we'll be back with our terrible gaming with the Trash Panda on Wednesday. So thank you very much for all of you being here, and we can now excitedly say that we did hit our 50 followers, which was really amazing. Thank you all of you for coming and following along. And yeah, have a great night, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.